Now that we've set up the timeline with the numbers and the basic structure, and we've added the movements of art, we need to incorporate some of the more advanced elements that will take your grade up from where it stands at the moment at a sort of U or an E to a higher. And the next logical step is to add in some transcriptions and responses to the artists that you've been looking at. So the most easy way to do this is through transcriptions. You can do these in black and white and in colour, and they could be in any medium that you choose. So for example, black and white could be pencil drawing, it could be charcoal, although you might want to fix it and make sure it's secure. It could also be pen and ink, or anything like that, or even black and white paint. And colour could be full colour, as in you're trying to replicate the full colours you see in the painting, or it could be a subset of those. So you might just do a warm and a cool and a mid, make sure you've got a mid-tone and a highlight and a dark tone in there. So anyway, let's go forward and have a look at what the exam board are looking for and what you're trying to supply. So the first thing to think about is the evidence of the exam board, and the first two assessment objectives that really deal with this is AO1 and AO3. So let's have a quick look at those. AO1 is developing ideas through sustained and focused investigations, informed by contextual and other sources, demonstrating analytical and critical understanding. And the key takeout of that is that we are looking at ideas to be informed by context. So the contextual association will be artists and their work, and we need to demonstrate analytical and critical understanding. And the two ways that we can demonstrate analytical and critical understanding is through visual and written language, and we'll come back to that later. AO3 is about recording ideas, observations and insights relevant to intentions, reflecting critically on work and progress. So even at this early stage in the project, you need to make sure that you're evaluating, reflecting, reviewing and refining. So let's see what you can do to do that. We're going to cover this in wide research and narrow research. So the wide research is the timeline, it's the mind map, it's your initial sketches, transcriptions, periods, movements, main subjects, broad subject areas, and you can see that we've got obviously the timelines in there. We've got some sketches, transcriptions, those are in there, periods and movements. Those really do cover that. And in narrow research, we're focusing on artists or groups or a few works or a specific subject area or topic. So we will revisit this in artist pages and transcriptions and so on, but we really need to presage this or make it first apparent in the timeline. So now let's have a look at the timeline. And you can see on the first half of the timeline, I've added two pencil drawings. One by Juan Sanchez Cotam and the other by Melendez. So they're both Spanish. That wasn't really my intention. They just turned out to be two that I picked on. So let's have a look at those in detail. Here's the Cotam one, and you can see I haven't attenuated or altered my own personal drawing style at all. I've kept it pretty much as I would do with my normal drawings. Lots and lots of mark making and wavy lines, as I'm sure you'll recognise by now. But I've done a drawing and I've approximated or made equivalence to what's going on in the painting in my drawing. Even though it's black and white and the actual painting is in colour, you can see that I'm thinking about the tones, I'm thinking about building up the space and presenting the image, but I've changed it. It's no longer Cotan's, it's mine now. And I've done the same with Melendez. I've greatly simplified what he had, and I've used the language of my drawing and structures to create a foreground and to create a background and the mid in the middle. So those are the quick drawings that I'll put in there, and you can see they sit on the first page of the timeline. If I go to the next page, you can see that I've added two more drawings there. And we're now in the late 19th century, early 20th century, so we've got Paul Cézanne drawing here, which shows you elements of Paul Cézanne and the way he constructs space and deals with that, and it's obviously a take on one of his paintings. And that's really what a transcription is. It's a take, it's a version, it's a cover of. It's not, doesn't have to be a slavish copy. You don't have to get everything exactly right and in the same place. And the same is true of this Daltrey lino cut that I've turned into a very simple, quite quick, sketchy drawing that I've just put in there. So that's okay, and you can see I've done it quite casually, and I've written Daltrey just as I have done on Cézanne and on Melendez and Cotan, just in pencil in the corner. So when we look at that, we get a couple of pencil drawings now established on the timeline to show us roughly where we are, and they're kind of in the right places as well. So what we've now got is drawing and painting through transcriptions. on the timeline, but they're only pencil drawings and we probably need to beef those up a bit. We don't have any evaluation or commentary, nothing that tells the exam board what you can learn from any of these artists and how you can take what you've learned and apply it to your work, and what you're pulling out, what you're selecting, what you're choosing to understand. So let's go back to the timeline and add some colour. And here you can see I've added a transcription of a famous Caravaggio, and let's look at that in detail. I've done it using gouache paint because I don't have any acrylics available at the time and I didn't want to use watercolour. Now I personally don't like gouache because it's an unhappy halfway house for me, just for me, between watercolour and acrylic, and I think you get the kind of the worst of both worlds without the best of both worlds. So you get the worst of watercolour and the worst of acrylic, but you can't really play to the strengths of building it up in layers that you can with acrylic, or going for quick washes that fade in and blend that you can with watercolour. And I've drawn into it with other colours, so I've changed the Caravaggio quite a lot. I'm not very happy with it, as you'll see with my next transcription as well. But so what I would do is I would evaluate this and add annotations to it, and I would say it hasn't worked out very well for me because, and so long as I say why and I explain and I give the reasons for that unhappiness, I can't just say I don't think it's very good. That's no good at all. That's just assertion, that's just assumption. It doesn't say anything, doesn't explain anything. I get no marks for that. That's low order thinking. If I say I didn't enjoy using gouache because it doesn't behave in the characteristic way that acrylic does, which allows me to build up layers of the image and work over them and to give a kind of thickness to the paint and achieve a solidity, that's one thing. It also doesn't allow me the subtle blending and bleeds that watercolours will allow, with paint dripping and blending into another colour on a larger scale. That's another thing. If I could say that I found that I was working from a poor reproduction and it didn't allow me to then build up and work into the details of what I was trying to do with the Caravaggio, and you can see that, for example, I've had to reduce the grapes down to two colours. Some of the fruit in the background is just mid-tone, and then I've drawn over the basket in blues and purples, which aren't there in the original, because that was the only solution I could find that would allow the picture to work together and allow that blue to go through and harmonise and pull the whole thing together in a limited sort of way. And I'm unhappy with that as a solution because I think it looks like it diminishes the image. Then that's fine. I've explained what my problems were. I explained what I did. The next bit I need to go on and say is, what will I do? Either A, I won't be revisiting Caravaggio because he's not suitable to me and the work that I'm interested in, or B, I won't be working with gouache again, but I will try to solve that by using thicker paint in acrylic, or D, I will avoid it altogether and just use washes of colour in ink and a brush or in watercolour to build it up like that. So as long as I explain it and say what I've got from that experience, even if I say I haven't got anything from Caravaggio, I've learned something about handling materials, I've learned something about the way I've painted, and that's going to change things for me, then that's something that I can put in that's really good. The same is true on the next page. If I look at my my new painting of a Braque analytical cubist painting, you can see I haven't made a great success of this either. However, I can say that typically I like to unify the picture with underpainting and bring colours through, and I've still done that here, but I haven't really got to grips with the way that he's looking at things in multiple simultaneous viewpoints, and that he builds things up so they have detail and they appear to be solid, and all mine seems to fall apart and doesn't really retain that solidity. So we don't get any difference between the central shapes and the background shapes. That seems apparent and seems to be what Braque's trying to do. He's trying to render a surface from multiple viewpoints and to give some things background status and some things foreground status, but to make equivalents of them. I seem to have missed the point there, and mine just don't seem to give you that sense of the surface being articulated and moved around. So you could look at that and you could say, well, that's a bit of a failure. But I might say, well, it is a failure, and it's something that I haven't done so well. However, what he's doing does interest me, and I've got a feeling that I will like to revisit this at some point, because there's something about the way he's working and the fragmentation and the intention of representing things in a new radical way that really appeals to me. And I also like the way that he develops and builds up a surface, and although it hasn't been successful on this occasion, I think if I look at more Braque paintings, I think I can find more in them that will stimulate me. So that's something that I might want to do. The next one that I looked at was by William Nicholson, and you can see there's some bits in here that I've really struggled with again as well. I've reduced the colour and simplified the image and made it much more simple and sketchy. You can see that the teapot in the foreground, the lid doesn't seem to work very well with the base of the teapot, and the spout on the teapot in the background. I overdid the black and didn't put the enough light tone over the top of it, so it looks as though it's been turning into a bit of a Georges Braque, looking at it from different angles. So it looks like the spout's coming towards us and the pot's going away from us. So the logic of the picture is breaking down through inept paint handling, and I need to sort of work further on this. But I could say again, there's something in the way that William Nicholson works, which is very bold and direct, even though it's very traditional and antiquated. So he's taking a sort of Renaissance model and adding little bits to it by being rough and quite quick with the way he handles the paint. But there's a sort of real finesse and elegance in the way he paints, which I find attractive and interesting. And although I haven't mastered it in this one here, I think I want to take that further forward too. So those are things that I could learn from Nicholson about techniques, processes, ways of working. There are things that I could learn from Braque as well, Georges Braque, that I probably want to go back and revisit. And those are all points that I could make when I come to look at my timeline and add to the next element. I've got big gaps around these pictures here that I could add text to, which would complete it, and I can do that on both of the pages of the timeline. And that is what I should be trying to do in the next video.